January 31st, 1968. 2:47 a.m. Saigon, South Vietnam. The air inside the US Embassy compound smells of burnt powder and wet concrete. Smoke drifts low, clinging to the palm trees like fog that doesn't belong in the tropics. Somewhere beyond the walls, automatic fire snaps in short, controlled bursts, close enough to feel, close enough to count. Inside a dim operations room, a junior Army intelligence officer grips a radio handset with both hands. His knuckles are white. Sweat runs down his spine, soaking the collar of his pressed uniform. The voice on the other end is shouting, cutting in and out, reporting enemy movement inside the city. Not outside, inside. Maps are spread across a long table, edges curling from humidity. For years, these maps have been filled with reassuring colors. Blue for friendly zones, neat arrows showing progress, tidy lines indicating control. Tonight, red grease pencil slashes across them like wounds. This isn't supposed to be happening. You can almost hear the lie collapsing. For months, years really, official briefings have promised that victory is near. The enemy is weakening. The body counts prove it. Progress charts climb steadily upward. Press conferences repeat the same phrases with confident smiles, light at the end of the tunnel. And yet here, at nearly 3 a.m, enemy fighters are breaching the heart of Saigon. Someone mutters, barely audible, "They told us this city was secure." No one answers. Washington is asleep when the first reports begin arriving. The cables are marked URGENT, stamped and restamped as they move through secure channels. By dawn, the Oval Office will be flooded with updates, fragmented, contradictory, impossible to ignore. But for now, the illusion still stands, and that illusion has been carefully built. For years before this night, the war has been narrated not from jungles or villages, but from briefing rooms. Air-conditioned spaces where generals stand before microphones, where charts replace blood and numbers substitute for human cost. Each afternoon in Saigon, military spokesmen step up to podiums. Reporters crowd in, notebooks open. The language is precise, reassuring, casual even. Enemy casualties today numbered in the hundreds. Our forces achieved all objectives. Pacification efforts continue to show measurable success. The phrase body count becomes currency. Higher numbers mean progress. Progress means success. Success means the war is being won. The reporters dutifully write it down. What they don't see are the internal assessments, classified reports marked secret and top secret, circulating far from cameras. These documents speak a different language. They describe villages secured during the day and abandoned at night. They note enemy units destroyed on paper, then encountered again weeks later. They warn that territory held requires constant force, constant blood. One report, buried deep in the chain of command, states plainly, enemy capability to initiate large-scale operations remains intact. It goes unread by the public. It goes unheard by the families watching evening news broadcasts back home. In Washington, senior officials repeat the same message with unwavering confidence. The president stands at a lectern, jaw set, voice firm. Advisors flank him, their expressions carefully neutral. The war, they say, is being prosecuted effectively. The enemy is losing the will to fight. Behind closed doors, the tone changes. In secure rooms, far from microphones, the conversations are tense. Intelligence briefings stretch late into the night. Analysts argue over projections. Charts don't line up. Numbers don't reconcile. How do you explain enemy strength increasing, one analyst asks quietly, when we're killing them at this rate? No one answers that question either, because the answer is dangerous. If the numbers are wrong, if the metrics are flawed, if the enemy isn't breaking, then what, exactly, has been happening for all these years? Back in Saigon, the night deepens. Explosions thud in the distance, muted but unmistakable. A Marine officer steps into the operations room, helmet under his arm, face streaked with grime. He points at the map without ceremony. They're hitting district headquarters across the city, coordinated, timed. Coordinated, timed. That word lands heavily. This isn't a desperate enemy lashing out. This is planning, organization, confidence. Outside, tracer rounds arc through the dark like burning commas, punctuating the night. Embassy guards crouch behind barricades, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the perimeter wall. For years, the enemy has been described as weakened, scattered, incapable of large-scale operations. Tonight, they are everywhere. Thousands of miles away, American living rooms glow with the soft blue light of television screens. Families sit on couches, coffee mugs rest on end tables. The war feels distant, filtered through calm voices and polished studio lighting. The anchor speaks steadily. There are reports of increased enemy activity in South Vietnam. Military officials assure us the situation is under control. Under control? The phrase is repeated so often it loses meaning. But control is not what it feels like in Saigon. It feels like shock. It feels like realization creeping in, unwanted and undeniable. As dawn approaches, helicopters thump overhead, ferrying reinforcements. Smoke rises from neighborhoods that were, just yesterday, marked as secure. Embassy staff move documents into fireproof containers. Shredders hum continuously, chewing through paper that was never meant to see daylight. A senior officer studies the map, red markings now overwhelming the blue. He exhales slowly. "This will change things," he says. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. Because everyone in the room understands what's happening. The war that has been sold as nearly won is revealing itself, suddenly, violently, as something else entirely. Not a victory march, but a reckoning. By mid-morning, the reports reach the highest levels. The scope of the offensive becomes clearer. Attacks are not isolated. They are nationwide. Cities, towns, military installations, struck simultaneously. The enemy has chosen the moment carefully. They have chosen perception over territory. They have chosen shock over occupation. And in doing so, they have exposed the fragile scaffolding holding up years of optimistic claims. In a secure briefing room, a general stares at a situation summary, lips pressed tight. The numbers on the page contradict years of assurances he has delivered personally. He knows what this means, not just militarily, but politically. If the enemy can do this, if they were capable of this all along, then every statement about progress will be questioned, every chart will be re-examined, every promise will be doubted. The war has not changed overnight, but understanding of it has. The illusion is cracking, and once the public sees what has been hidden, once the gap between words and reality becomes visible, there will be no repairing it. Because wars are not only fought with bullets and bombs, they are fought with trust. And that trust is about to shatter. February 1st, 1968, 9:12 a.m., Pentagon, Washington, D.C. The room is windowless, sealed tight against leaks, of sound, of paper, of truth. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. A long table stretches the length of the room, polished so perfectly it reflects the stacks of briefing folders laid out at each seat. A general clears his throat. He has delivered hundreds of briefings like this. He knows the cadence by heart. Start with progress. Reinforce confidence. Acknowledge setbacks only in passing. But today, his voice hesitates. The first slide clicks onto the screen. Enemy casualties. Estimated 40,000 killed in recent operations. It's a staggering number. On paper, it should represent annihilation. It should mean collapse. Instead, the next slide appears. Enemy-initiated attacks, up sharply across every major urban center. A murmur ripples through the room, barely audible but unmistakable. The numbers don't make sense together. They never really have. For years, the war has been measured in arithmetic. Kill ratios, sortie counts, tonnage dropped, Hamlet evaluations scored on tidy scales from secure to contested. It is a war reduced to spreadsheets, where success is something you can graph. In Saigon, the Military Assistance Command compiles daily tallies. Units in the field radio in estimates after engagements. Sometimes they count bodies. Sometimes they count blood trails. Sometimes they infer numbers based on firepower expended. Precision is impossible, but the numbers always go up. They have to. A battalion commander who reports low enemy casualties risks questions, doubt, career consequences. A commander who reports high numbers reinforces the narrative everyone above him expects to hear. So the counts inflate, not out of malice, but momentum. A dead enemy becomes 2, 2 become 10, 10 become victory, and no one wants to be the first to say the math is wrong. Deep inside the intelligence community, analysts have been whispering concerns for years. They track enemy unit reappearances. They notice the same formations being destroyed multiple times. They see infiltration routes continuing despite relentless bombing. One analyst writes in a classified assessment, "Attrition models assume the enemy's shares are tolerance thresholds. Evidence suggests otherwise." In plain terms, we are counting bodies. They are counting time. The enemy absorbs losses that would break a conventional army. They replace the dead faster than models predict. They redefine what victory even means. But those assessments don't make headlines. Body counts do. In a press briefing room in Saigon, cameras whir to life. A military spokesman steps to the podium, crisp uniform, confident posture. Reporters lean forward. Pens hover. "Despite recent enemy actions," he says, "this offensive represents a last, desperate gamble. They have exposed themselves. Their losses are unsustainable." Unsustainable. It's a word chosen carefully. It reassures. It ends questions. But outside the room, reality refuses to cooperate. In Hue, ancient walls echo with gunfire. Street-to-street fighting drags on for days, then weeks. Marines clear buildings room by room. Each courtyard taken is paid for in blood. An officer radios in casualty figures. Enemy dead, dozens. Friendly losses, mounting. The city, long described as stable, lies in ruins. In Ben Tre, artillery pounds neighborhoods to deny the enemy cover. Later, a US officer will say something that slips past censors and lodges itself in history. It became necessary to destroy the town to save it. The arithmetic of the war has become grotesque. Villages secured by erasure. Progress measured by absence. Victory defined by what no longer exists. Back in Washington, the disconnect grows harder to ignore. Briefers present optimistic summaries, but buried appendices, rarely discussed, paint a darker picture. Pacification rates stall. Desertion among Allied forces increases. Enemy morale remains intact. One internal memo circulates quietly, its language unusually blunt. Public representations of progress increasingly diverge from field assessments. It is not meant for public release. It is meant as a warning. The press begins to notice. Correspondents who have spent months embedded with units start filing stories that don't match official statements. They describe firefights where the enemy refuses to break. They question claims of control over areas that revert overnight. Editors back home hesitate. Contradicting official briefings is risky. Access can vanish. Credentials can be pulled. But the footage coming in is undeniable. Cities under attack. Embassies breached. Fighting where none was supposed to exist. Viewers see the images, and they feel something shift. In living rooms across America, the war no longer feels distant or orderly. It feels chaotic, uncertain, unfinished. A mother watches footage of Marines crouched behind rubble and wonders how this squares with the phrase, "Victory is near." A college student listens to casualty figures and hears a draft notice echoing behind every number. Questions begin to surface. If we're winning, why does it look like this? Why does it feel like this? Inside the Pentagon, senior officials grapple with a realization they have tried to avoid. The metrics they relied on, body counts, territory charts, attrition models, have failed to capture the nature of the war they are fighting. They have mistaken endurance for weakness. They have mistaken persistence for desperation. They have mistaken numbers for truth. And now, the enemy has forced that truth into the open, not through victory on the battlefield, but through contradiction. A war declared nearly won should not look like this. And once that contradiction is seen, it cannot be unseen.
Late one evening, an aide places a stack of newspapers on a desk. The headlines are cautious, but the tone has changed. Officials reassess war progress. Questions raised after nationwide attacks. Confidence shaken. The language is subtle, but the meaning is clear. The numbers that once reassured are now suspect. And if the numbers lied, what else did? Somewhere between the charts and the corpses, the war has slipped beyond the control of those narrating it. The story they told no longer fits the images the public sees, and the gap between those two realities is widening fast. Soon, it will demand an answer. On college campuses, protests swell, not just against the war, but against deception. Signs appear bearing a single word: why? Why are we there? Why are we still fighting? Why were we told victory was near? Draft boards feel the pressure. Politicians feel it more. The war is no longer abstract. It is personal, political, moral. And it is being argued not just in jungles, but in kitchens, classrooms, and congressional hallways. Inside the intelligence community, frustration simmers. Many analysts feel vindicated. They have warned for years that the war's complexity cannot be reduced to numbers and optimism, that the enemy's strategy is political, psychological, generational. One senior analyst confides to a colleague, "We didn't lose control of the war, we lost control of the story." And in modern war, the story matters. In Saigon, commanders adapt tactically. Enemy units are driven back, urban centers are retaken. Militarily, the offensive fails to achieve lasting territorial gains, but no one can say, honestly, that it feels like victory. The fighting has exposed vulnerabilities. It has exposed assumptions. It has exposed the cost of believing your own press releases. Soldiers in the field sense it too. They hear the briefings. They see the maps. But they also see the enemy return. They fight for the same ground again and again. A Marine corporal writes home, "They say we're winning. I just don't know what winning looks like anymore." Back in Washington, a critical decision looms. If public trust continues to erode, if the narrative collapses entirely, then escalation becomes impossible. The war has entered a new phase, not defined by firepower or troop numbers, but by belief. And belief is slipping. Fast. Behind closed doors, the question no one wants to ask is finally voiced. What if we can't win this war the way we said we could? It hangs in the air, heavy and dangerous. Because once that question is asked, the entire foundation of policy, past, present, future, comes into question. The credibility gap is no longer theoretical. It is visible, audible, televised. And the people watching are drawing their own conclusions. The illusion has not just cracked, it is collapsing. And the men who built it are about to face a choice: double down, or confront the truth they have spent years avoiding. March 25, 1968. 11:43 p.m. The White House, Cabinet Room. The doors are closed, locked, guards posted outside. Inside, the room is dim except for a single lamp casting long shadows across the polished table. Coffee cups sit untouched, ashtrays overflow. The men gathered here are exhausted, not from travel or lack of sleep, but from carrying a story that is no longer sustainable. At the head of the table sits Lyndon B. Johnson. He looks older than he did a year ago. His shoulders sag. The confidence that once defined him has been eroded by nightly reports and relentless doubt. He rubs his temples. "Let's stop pretending," he says quietly. No one speaks. This is not a press briefing. There are no cameras, no prepared remarks, no applause lines. This is where the truth is allowed to surface, if only briefly. The Secretary of Defense clears his throat and opens a folder marked Top Secret, Eyes Only. Inside are assessments that will never be read aloud to the public. They outline a grim reality. The enemy's political infrastructure remains intact. Attrition has failed to break their will. Escalation risks widening the war beyond control. De-escalation risks admitting years of miscalculation. Every option carries consequences. Every consequence carries blame. One advisor speaks softly but firmly. "Mr. President, we've been saying one thing publicly and another privately. The gap is no longer manageable." There it is. Not credibility gap, not yet. Just an acknowledgement that two realities now exist, and they are colliding. Johnson leans back in his chair. He has spent his life mastering power, counting votes, twisting arms, bending institutions to his will. Domestic policy bends to him. Congress fears him. He knows how to win. But Vietnam refuses to yield. "You're telling me," he says, voice tight, "that after all this, we can't see a clear path?" Silence answers him. Then another advisor speaks. "We can continue. Increase troop levels, increase bombing." He pauses. "But we can't guarantee it changes the outcome." That sentence lands harder than any accusation. For years, escalation has been the default solution. More troops, more bombs, more pressure. Each increase justified as the final push. Each push followed by the same question: why isn't it working? The enemy adapts, absorbs, endures. Internal projections now suggest that even massive increases may only prolong the war, not end it. And prolongation is politically lethal. Johnson looks down at the table. He knows what the public believes. He knows what he has told them. He also knows what these men are now admitting. The war cannot be won in the way it was sold. Not quickly, not decisively, not without costs the nation may not accept. And that means something unthinkable for a sitting president during wartime: reconsideration. Across town, another set of documents circulates quietly among senior officials. Draft speeches, never delivered, explore a shift in language, from victory to stalemate, from progress to negotiation, from winning to ending. Each draft feels dangerous, because words matter. And once you stop promising victory, you are admitting the past was wrong. Meanwhile, the military continues fighting. Patrols push into jungles. Artillery pounds coordinates. Pilots fly sorties over targets that have been struck dozens of times before. The machinery of war does not pause for doubt. But the men directing it now carry a different burden. They know the truth, and they know they cannot say it, at least not yet. Johnson rises from his chair and walks toward the window, even though the curtains are drawn. He speaks without turning around. "I won't be the first American president to lose a war." The room is still. No one challenges him, but no one reassures him either. Because deep down, they all understand the reality emerging. This war is no longer about winning on the battlefield. It is about managing loss, of lives, of trust,
of power. And once that realization takes hold, everything changes. Within days, Johnson will make a decision that shocks the nation. One that signals, without saying it outright, that the illusion has finally become too heavy to carry. But for now, in this closed room, the truth remains contained. Barely. And outside these walls, the country continues to wait, unaware that the story it has been told is about to shift in ways no one can fully control. March 31st, 1968, 9 p.m., Oval Office, Washington, D.C. The camera light flicks on. For a fraction of a second, the room is silent. So quiet, you can almost hear the electrical hum of the broadcast equipment. The president sits behind the resolute desk, hands folded, shoulders squared. An American flag stands motionless behind him. Millions of people are watching. This address was not advertised as historic. No dramatic language preceded it. Most Americans expect another update, another reassurance, another careful balance of optimism and resolve. Instead, they are about to witness something unprecedented. The president begins speaking calmly, deliberately. He talks about peace, about restraint, about the need to reduce bombing in North Vietnam as a step toward negotiations. Already, this is unexpected. Then he pauses. The pause stretches longer than planned. And then he says it. I shall not seek, and I will not accept, the nomination of my party for another term as your president. The words land like a shockwave. Across the country, mouths fall open. Pens stop moving. Newsrooms erupt in confusion. A sitting president, during wartime, has just removed himself from the race. Without saying it directly, the message is unmistakable. The war has broken something. Inside the White House, aides stand frozen. Some stare at monitors. Others look at the floor. A few close their eyes. They understand what the public is only beginning to grasp. This is not just a political decision. It is an admission, not of defeat, but of limits. For years, American leadership has projected certainty, control, direction, the assurance that sacrifices are leading somewhere concrete. This announcement shatters that image. If the man leading the war will not continue, what does that say about the war itself? Johnson never utters the words, "We were wrong." He doesn't have to. The absence of ambition speaks louder than any confession. In Saigon, officers gather around radios. Some listen alone, others in small groups, helmets still on, weapons slung across their backs. A captain shakes his head slowly. "So that's it," he murmurs. Not the end of the war, but the end of pretending it is going according to plan. In North Vietnam, leaders listen carefully. They analyze every sentence, every pause, every omission. They understand American politics. They understand pressure. They understand patience. This announcement confirms what they have believed all along. Time is on their side. They did not need to defeat the United States militarily. They only needed to endure. In American homes, conversations stretch late into the night. Some feel relief, others anger. Many feel confusion. Parents stare at draft notices with renewed dread. Students argue over what comes next. Veterans listen quietly, unsure how to process what they've just heard. Trust, once fractured, does not snap back into place. It erodes. The next morning, headlines scream across front pages. President bows out. War toll claims a presidency. Questions mount over Vietnam. Commentators speak of courage, of statesmanship, of political sacrifice. But beneath the commentary lies a simpler truth. The story the nation was told for years can no longer be sustained, even by the man who told it. Inside government agencies, the shift is immediate. Language changes. Victory disappears from memos. Timelines become indefinite. Objectives become stability and containment. These are not winning words, they are managing words. And everyone knows the difference. The war continues, of course. Men still fight. Men still die. Bombs still fall. But the emotional center of gravity has moved. The illusion that progress was inevitable, that victory was near, has collapsed under its own weight. And now, the country must reckon with what comes after belief. Because once faith in leadership fractures, once trust erodes, once the narrative falls apart, the consequences ripple far beyond a single war. They seep into institutions, into politics, into how a nation understands truth itself. And those consequences are only beginning to unfold.
April 2nd, 1968, 4:35 a.m., Kaisan Combat Base. Quang tree sticks rain drums against sandbags, a steady, exhausting rhythm. Mud sucks at boots with every step. A Marine crouches in a fighting hole, helmet pulled low, rifle angled toward the darkness beyond the wire. Flares hiss into the sky, bathing the hills in ghostly white light, then darkness again. Nothing has changed out here. The war does not pause for speeches. But something intangible has shifted. The men feel it. For years, soldiers have been told they are part of a clear trajectory. Sacrifice now, victory soon. That promise has sustained them through heat, fear, and loss. Now, that promise is gone. No announcement explains it. No order formalizes it. It simply dissolves, quietly, unmistakably. The war continues, but belief does not. In command tents, officers still issue orders. Operations still launch at dawn. Patrols still push into contested terrain. But the language has changed. No one says final push anymore. No one says breaking point. No one promises end dates. They speak instead of holding actions, of pressure, of time. Time for what, exactly, no one can say. Back in Washington, the machinery of policy grinds on, but without a unifying story. Hearings multiply. Committees demand explanations. Senators who once echoed optimistic briefings now ask pointed questions. Were we misled? Did leadership know? When did doubt begin? These questions are radioactive, because answering them honestly would expose years of calculated optimism, half-beliefs dressed up as certainty. Inside the Pentagon, planners confront a brutal paradox. Militarily, the United States still possesses overwhelming power. The enemy cannot defeat American forces in conventional terms. But politically, every additional casualty deepens public skepticism. Victory without trust is meaningless, and trust is gone. A new administration looms. Campaign speeches promise peace with honor. The phrase is deliberately vague, broad enough to inspire hope, narrow enough to avoid specifics. Behind the scenes, advisors debate what honor actually means. Withdrawal? Negotiation? Prolonged stalemate? Each option carries the same haunting question. How do you end a war when you've already lost control of its meaning? In Vietnam, the enemy senses the shift. They do not celebrate. They do not rush. They wait. They understand that American politics now matters more than American firepower. That television screens and opinion polls have become as decisive as battlefields. Their strategy remains unchanged. Endure. Outlast. Let time do the work. For American soldiers, the cost becomes psychological. They fight bravely, professionally, but many no longer believe their actions fit into a larger purpose. A sergeant writes in his journal, "We're still taking hills, we just don't know why anymore." That uncertainty corrodes morale more effectively than any ambush. The war drags on, years longer than many imagined possible. Troop levels rise, then slowly fall.
Bombing intensifies, then pauses. Negotiations begin, stall, resume. Each phase is announced as progress. Fewer people believe it. The illusion that once unified policy, public and battlefield reality is gone for good. In its place is fragmentation, of opinion, of purpose, of trust. And that fragmentation reshapes the nation. Citizens grow skeptical of official statements. Journalists press harder. Governments learn, sometimes too late, that credibility is not renewable on demand. Once spent, it is gone. The Vietnam War will not end with a single dramatic collapse, but with exhaustion, in political, moral, emotional. And when it finally does end, years later, Americans will look back not just at battles lost or won, but at a deeper failure. The moment when leaders stopped telling the public what they knew and started believing their own reassurances. That is the legacy Tet exposed. Not defeat on the battlefield, but the cost of illusion. What follows, withdrawal, reckoning, silence, will redefine how the United States fights wars, reports wars, and believes its leaders. And that reckoning is still ahead.
May 13th, 1968. 10:06 a.m. Paris, Avenue Kléber. Rain slicks the pavement outside a nondescript building guarded by French police. Inside, the chandeliers glow softly above a long table where diplomats take their seats, papers aligned, expressions controlled. The peace talks begin with handshakes. They are polite, they are formal, they are, for now, meaningless. Because everyone in the room understands the unspoken truth. These talks are not about winning. They are about stopping the bleeding, political, moral, psychological. The negotiations crawl forward in inches. Disputes over table shape, over flags, over who sits where. Symbolism replaces substance because symbolism is safer than truth. While diplomats argue over protocol, the war continues unchanged. In Vietnam, patrols still push into the jungle. Helicopters still thump across rice paddies. Young men still die for hills that will be abandoned weeks later. The machinery of war and the theatre of peace operates side by side, disconnected but inseparable. Back home, the unravelling accelerates. Protests swell from thousands to hundreds of thousands. Not just students now, parents, veterans, clergy. The signs grow angrier, the chants louder. Stop the lies. Bring them home. Trust, once cracked, is now openly contested. Government briefings are met with skepticism. Official statements parsed for omissions. Journalists interrupt. Press secretaries deflect. The war has lost the benefit of the doubt. In November, a new president takes office, Richard Nixon. He inherits a war already poisoned by disbelief. His promise is carefully worded: peace with honor. It resonates because it avoids specifics. It acknowledges pain without assigning blame. It suggests an ending without explaining how. Behind closed doors, his advisors wrestle with the same reality that broke their predecessors. There is no clean exit. The strategy shifts. Publicly, troop withdrawals begin. Numbers are announced with fanfare. Charts finally move in the opposite direction. Privately, bombing intensifies elsewhere. Secret operations expand. Pressure is applied not to win outright, but to gain leverage at the negotiating table. The illusion returns, smaller now, more cautious, but still an illusion, and the public senses it. Each announcement of progress is followed by footage of escalation. Each promise of de-escalation is followed by new casualties. The credibility gap does not close, it calcifies. In Vietnam, Allied forces feel the shift immediately. They are no longer the centerpiece of strategy. They are leverage, presence as message. A platoon leader explains to his men why they're moving into a village scheduled for withdrawal.
"It's about timing," he says, unsure he believes it. The men nod. They've learned not to ask what comes after. At home, the war fractures the country along lines deeper than policy. Families stop speaking, campuses become battlegrounds, the uniform itself becomes controversial. Returning soldiers are met not with parades, but with silence, or worse. The war has followed them home. By 1970, the conflict spills beyond borders, igniting new outrage. Protests turn deadly. The sense that leadership is always one step behind the truth becomes widespread. Every revelation reinforces the same belief. We are being told what is useful, not what is true. The unraveling is no longer just about Vietnam. It is about authority, about whether leaders can be trusted to speak honestly when the stakes are high, about whether optimism is policy or deception. As negotiations drag on year after year, one fact becomes undeniable. The war will not end with victory. It will end with an agreement no one celebrates. And when it does, the silence afterward will be louder than any speech. Because the nation will not just be asking, what did we lose in Vietnam? It will be asking something far more dangerous. When did we stop believing our leaders, and why? The answer is approaching, and it will not be comforting. In living rooms across America, the war ends not with celebration, but with a channel change. Another announcement, another headline, another moment passed. The silence afterward feels strange, as if the nation is unsure how to speak about something that consumed it for over a decade. Years later, Saigon will fall. The images will shock the world. Helicopters lifting from rooftops, crowds surging, allies abandoned. But by then, the illusion will already be gone. What remains is consequence. The true ending of the war does not come with the last helicopter. It comes earlier, quietly, when leaders stop promising victory and start managing retreat. When optimism gives way to pragmatism. When belief collapses under the weight of reality. In retrospect, the war did not break America in a single moment. It eroded it, slowly, relentlessly, by teaching a hard lesson. Power does not guarantee control. Numbers do not guarantee truth. And confidence does not guarantee victory. The cost of Vietnam is measured in lives lost and nations changed. But its deeper cost is measured in something harder to quantify: trust. Trust, once broken, is not easily restored. And in the years that follow, through future wars, future briefings, future promises, that fracture will remain visible. Every assurance questioned, every statistic doubted, every claim weighed against memory. The war ends, the reckoning does not, because the illusion that shattered during Tet was not just about Vietnam. It was about how wars are sold, how truths are shaped, and how long a nation can believe something simply because it wants to. One final question lingers, unanswered, uncomfortable, unavoidable. If this could happen once, could it happen again? April 30th, 1975. 7:53 a.m., Saigon. The U.S. Embassy rooftop. Rotor wash tears across the concrete, scattering loose papers like startled birds. A helicopter settles hard, skids biting the rooftop. Marines wave civilians forward, fast, faster, hands grabbing arms, pulling people toward the open door. There is no speech, no anthem, no explanation, just urgency. You can almost feel the panic in the air, the sound of it, the weight of it, as the aircraft lifts away, leaving a city behind. This is not how wars are supposed to end. The images circle the world within hours. They confirm what many already knew, but had avoided saying aloud. The war did not end in victory, it ended in departure, and the silence that follows is heavy. Back in the United States, officials offer careful statements. The language is restrained, measured, designed to close a chapter without reopening wounds. But the public doesn't need words anymore. They have seen enough. For years, leaders promised progress. Charts rose, body counts climbed, maps filled with friendly colors. Then came Tet, then doubt, then withdrawal, then this. The arc is unmistakable. In the months that follow, the nation turns inward. There are no grand trials, no formal confessions, no single moment of accountability. Instead, Vietnam becomes something Americans reference indirectly, through metaphors, through cautionary phrases, through silence. Another Vietnam. We can't repeat Vietnam. The Vietnam Syndrome. A war reduced to a warning. Inside government institutions, quiet reforms begin. Press briefings grow more cautious. Intelligence assessments are hedged. Military objectives are framed with caveats and conditions. No one says never again, but everyone thinks it. Because the memory lingers, not of defeat, but of dissonance, of being told one story while living another. Journalism changes too. Reporters become more skeptical. Editors push harder. Anonymous sources become commonplace. The press no longer accepts optimism at face value. The cost of Vietnam is etched into every hard question that follows. And for the soldiers who fought it, those who came home and those who didn't, the reckoning is deeply personal. Some struggle to explain what they were part of. Some carry pride and pain side by side. Some carry anger, not at the enemy, but at the narrative that framed their sacrifice. They were brave, they did their duty. But the story told about that duty failed them. Years later, future conflicts will arise, new enemies, new briefings, new assurances. Each time, someone will remember Vietnam. Each time, someone will ask harder questions. Because once a nation learns that certainty can be manufactured, that numbers can mislead, that optimism can become policy, it never listens the same way again. The Vietnam War did not just change foreign policy, it changed belief. It taught a generation that truth delayed is trust denied. That wars are not only fought abroad, but narrated at home. And that the moment reality and rhetoric diverge, the consequences can last decades. The illusion that finally broke during Tet was not an accident. It was the result of years of choosing reassurance over honesty. And when it shattered, it revealed something uncomfortable. Victory was never just a military goal. It was a story. And stories, once broken, cannot simply be retold. The helicopters fade into the distance. The rooftop empties. And the war, at last, falls quiet. Not with triumph, but with a question that still echoes long after the last shot is fired. When leaders say victory is near, how will we know when it's true?